how many people's lives that you can really change with just what you know and what's in your hands. Truly remarkable. I can't even fathom. Like I try to sit down and try to count of how many patients I've taken care of, like how many people I've actively adjusted. I lost count. And again, and even though we look at these huge numbers of people, but it was all worth it, honestly, if you just did one. You don't need to do millions. You just need to change one. That one for that one person is everything.
Well, welcome to the Vitalistic Voice. Today, I am just absolutely over the moon excited because I have a mentor, a coach of mine who's been a great friend of mine for many, many years. And I'm going to say, I want to give a really valuable introduction to Dr. Tony Nalda. Tony is leading the way when it comes to subluxation correction in a corrective care model in chiropractic through his research he's done in his office, through the scoliosis correction clinic. And I'm going to say he's probably the world's leading expert, arguably the world's leading expert on non-surgical scoliosis correction. Tony has had multiple thousands of patients come to his office from all over the world to get scoliosis correction. He has a YouTube channel that is probably the number one YouTube channel for scoliosis correction in the world. And we're just so excited to have him on the podcast today. Dr. Tony, thanks for being with us.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and I'm happy to share.
Well, so I want to go back to the beginning because I've known you for a long time and I know your transition in chiropractic has been very unique and you've gone in many different directions. So I want to just kind of explore that. So first of all, let's go way back to school. You were a graduate of Life University, Life Chiropractic College back in those days. Tell us the progression of how that all went.
Yeah, so actually, I assume what you're asking is like how I ended up becoming a chiropractor. Is that what
Yeah,
you're, yeah, got it.
yeah,
Okay,
let's
got it.
hear it.
So interesting story. In fact, when I talk about it, it almost sometimes brings back memories I don't want to go through because I was not a healthy child, unfortunately, and I suffered from lots of problems, but particularly my main issue being migraines. I had really, really bad migraines, daily migraines as a child, and somebody met my mother actually in a pharmacy when she was buying my Imitrex injections at the time, and she said, "Go try chiropractic." And my mom goes, "Well, she doesn't have my son doesn't have back pain, but she did. I went to go get adjusted, and as I started getting chiropractic care, my migraines started resolving, and at that moment, like I said, I want to become a chiropractor, and so I switched my idea of becoming actually some kind of neurologist or medical doctor to try to figure out my own cause to now switching to become a chiropractor. And from that moment on, I got adjusted from a doctor that graduated from Sherman, and he was a pretty principled type of chiropractor, talking about subluxation, talking about misalignments, talking, he took x-rays and measured these things. So I was into this idea of structural type of care and what he did and how he adjusted me. And so therefore, when I went into Life College, I that's the type of care I wanted to deliver, was what I received, right? This idea of corrective kind of care. So when I got into chiropractic college, I wanted to deliver this, but I had this purpose or this passion and how many Tonys exist in the world that are that are suffering and going all these medical doctors having all these drugs and medications. I mean, I was at one point I was on 9 narcotics on a daily basis, and I was like, so I had this huge mission or passion to reach the world, right? Just to get out there and see as many people I could possibly see to draw the Tonys out of the model and get them what they needed. And that's when I left chiropractic college. I gotta say that was my number one mission was how can I serve more people to impact more lives and more families than I could ever think of. That's what I wanted to do.
Just awesome. I love hearing the birth of greatness, really, and I remember, so when I first met you, you told me a little bit about your journey, and you originally started as an associate, am I correct, with Dr. Ben Lerner?
Funny enough is I that was my second job. So my first job was I was an associate or with the doctor who first took care of me, because in Florida at that time, I actually they required something called a like an internship, but it was a requirement by the Florida board before you can sit the Florida board. So everybody had to work for free pretty much for like 6 months to earn a certain number of hours before you could sit the floor to board. So I worked as under my chiropractors. And that when I would go back home to go see my chiropractor, Dr. Ben worked for him too, Dr. Lerner. And I got adjusted from Dr. Ben. It's not Dr. Ben and I actually initially met. And I went back there for like 6 months and I worked with him. And it basically said, okay, Tony, here's an adjusting table, here's a room, here's the X-ray machine, go get some patients. I'm like, oh, okay. And like, so I kind of didn't know a lot of what I was doing, but I kind of figured that out. And then I went into a very short time practice with my brother and my ex-wife at the time. We're all chiropractors. And then about a year after that, I ended up going to be an associate with Dr. Ben. So about 18 months after I was graduating chiropractic college is when I moved out of Miami back up to Central Florida to actually be what you're talking about, that associate for Dr. Ben.
You know, and so this is interesting how different people and different relationships we meet start to shape our thinking and shape our lives. Because then what happened after Dr. Ben's office, I remember you started a practice, you had your own practice in St. Cloud. And your
Yeah,
practice in St. Cloud was very different than your practice now. Can you talk about that?
yeah. The practice out in St. Cloud, it was different in a way, but it was I'm not going to say it was different in a bad or a good way. It was just different because my goal was really to take care of families. I wanted to see as many families as I could possibly see. So my goal was to reach into the community. And I was in St. Cloud was a very relatively small community. I mean, I wasn't in a town of 2 million people. I was in a town of 100,000, something like that. So the small suburb outside of Orlando. And so I just said, I just need to get families under care. So my goal was to start families. I very rarely saw an individual. So when I started a patient, instantly I had 5 more or 3 more because they started as groups of families. So I built a very, very busy office very, very quickly to, where I was seeing, 1,500 patients per week, some days up to 500 adjustments per day. And the idea was to get as many families under care as possible. But at the same time, I always wanted to deliver the highest level care that I knew at that time. And what I knew at that time was I was trying to deliver, back then was this kind of, I kind of came out of school understanding a little bit of chiropractic biophysics. So I was doing some chiropractic biophysics care, trying to combine it with what we're doing. And I had this idea of delivering a corrective model, but my number one motive was definitely starting families. Like I really want to take care of as many families as I can possibly take care of.
And so this is really cool. So now let's talk about the transition from that practice to moving to celebration, to starting to develop your skills and your knowledge and your delivery of chiropractic in more of a corrective care model and scoliosis correction model. How did that all transpire?
Yeah, it's actually a pretty crazy story in terms of like how it happened because so I continued on that path for I don't know, I gotta say, like I think I saw 1,500 people for about 10 years. And in that time that I was taking care of people, obviously I saw a lot of patients with a lot of spinal deformities. And I had people come in my office with scoliosis, and I was doing what I was taught, and I wasn't seeing a response. And in my brain, the biggest insult to the spine was potential full spinal fusion. Like I say, if you're going to do something bad to the spine, I couldn't think of a worse thing to do than fusing somebody's entire spine at 12 years old. Right. So I had this, I remember a patient come in and we were working with her and I couldn't get the curve to respond and change. And I go, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a way to help this person. So with this girl, I traveled with her to other offices and going to meet Dr. Wogan and going to meet Dr. Pettibon and trying to figure out what combination of treatment could we do chiropractically to try to stop this curve from worsening and progressing and prevent surgery. And that was really the birth of it. And with her, like her being that one patient being the motivation, like I literally stopped everything I was doing to save one spine from having surgery and trying to figure out. And I was still had a high volume practice, and I was still seeing a lot of people. But then I started to say, okay, there's got to be a better method. And I started questioning almost everything I was taught in chiropractic college because what I was taught wasn't working. So I started testing it. They said, okay, adjust like this. Well, I took X-rays of me adjusting like that, and did it produce a result that is like I was told it was produced? I started really testing it, and what I was realizing is everything I was taught wasn't really working like I thought it would work, right? And then, so over that period of time in 2010, when when I moved out of my office into this office, I was really transitioning into like, yes, I want to see as many families, but I want to get them I want to get them as healthy as possible, as fast as I can get them, because in scoliosis, time is not on is not on your side. Meaning they're worsening very quickly, very fast, and the slower you go, the worse they get. So I was this idea of now not just seeing as many families as I possibly could, is seeing as many families, but getting them as healthy as I can get them, as fast as I can get them, so I can see more different families, not the same family over and over. And so that mindset changed. And I was like, okay, there's got to be a better way. And I really started trying to improve how we get spinal corrective care, not only on scoliosis patients, but really every patient that I see, as quickly as I can to get them on stabilization or maintenance so I can open up my volume to see more individuals. So today, my volume isn't 1,500 a week, but I actually have more active patients than I had when I was seeing 1,500 a week because I'm seeing more individuals than I ever have. And because I can get them better so much quicker, right? Because of the techniques and the technology and what we have learned and how we develop what we develop. And I really believe that's the new volume. The volume of the future isn't how many people you see per week or what's your visits per week. The new volume is how many active care plans are you seeing? How many people are you getting truly better and you're on stabilization phase and you're just maintaining their spine on a healthy basis? How many of those do you have? Right?
Yeah,
Um,
that's amazing. That's amazing. So can I ask you, let's talk a little bit about the transition that you made from a practical sense. So moving into that office, and as you learn more and you go and you hang out with Dr. Burl Pettibon and you hang out with Dr. Dennis Wogan, and then I remember you got your CBP certification, Deed Harrison, you know all these really innovative people in the world of spinal correction, and you're bringing back all this information into your office, and you're transitioning from that high volume office that you had. What are some of the practical steps that you made to start to implement this very specific scoliosis and spinal correction into your clinic?
So, one thing that's probably brain damage with me, and it's probably brain damage, right, is that no matter how busy I am, I would always take the extra second to complete the job. I don't know if that makes sense. Like I remember in my high volume office, seeing 1,500 a week, and again, you're taking care of a lot of people. And if like the wedges weren't in the room, and I needed the wedges for the patient to like adjust their pelvis, walking from one side of the office to the other and back is a big deal when you have that many bodies. But I would stop my office, walk all over to the other part of their office, bring the wedges back in, put them on the patient, and give them the adjustment they needed. Because to me, like that delivering the completeness of the care mattered, right? And that's a value that I always held high. So even though we were seeing high volume, I did complete care. I didn't start just, okay, well, I'm not nothing against toggle. I'm not gonna just toggle everybody on the right. I was trying to do the most complete care I knew at the time. And that could be a little bit of brain damage with me. What I mean by that is that if I found out something new, it didn't take me a year to start putting it in. I mean, I would start putting it in tomorrow. Like it was like instant. And even if it took us more time and I would stumble and things would get slower and maybe I wasn't as efficient and maybe I wasn't as profitable, but to me, it didn't matter because my goal was the best spot. Now became the very best spinal care as fast, get them better, get them as healthy as I can get them as fast as I can get them there, not slowly. And so therefore I just implemented these things. So practically I just listed them out. Like I'm gonna get like, okay, I want to implement these things, and literally I would list them out. And for most doctors I coach, okay, if you could do one new thing a month, that's really good implementation. I remember implementing things daily, right? That quickly, like boom, changing this today, tomorrow I'm going to change that, next day I'm going to change that, and like within a week I have 7 new procedures I'm doing in my office that, again, which is insane. I would never recommend that for somebody to do, but my brain damage did that, and those were I would list it out and just whatever it took to get that in place, and then I'll move on to the next, and move on to the next, and move on to the next. and constantly implement a new procedure to get a better result.
I'm going to share a little story. So this is way
Yeah,
back when we first joined, it was Body by God back then, the coaching program. And
yeah,
we used to get on coaching calls, you and I. And I remember one of our first coaching calls, you asked me to do my day 2 script. And of course we had a pretty good practice and I was pretty confident. And I think this is the mentality, and this is the biggest thing that I've learned over the years, is that don't don't get into a place where you think you know it all. And I think I'm going to be very honest. There was a time when I felt that I did. I felt like I'm doing pretty good at what I'm doing, and had a bit of an ego around me as far as that goes. And I remember you saying that, and basically your feedback was that sucked. Like,
yeah. I remember that call with you to this day because it was impactful for you, but it was also impactful for me. Like, man, this guy, he's like for me, I was coaching you. I looked at you as almost like this guy's an icon. He's like, I know who he is in chiropractic. Had a successful office, and you did your day 2 to me. I'm like, I was expecting like this some kind of glorious, amazing day 2, and I go, man, that was really bad. That was really bad. And he goes, if he can have a great practice and be that, anybody can, which I thought was amazing in my own mind, right? Got it. But yeah, I do remember that call. I do remember that call. It was,
you know, but so this is the whole thing. It was eye-opening to me, and basically helped me to say, okay, listen, if I want to be great, if I want to reach a level of greatness, I need to work hard at what other people have already proven that works. So what I'm getting at now, I would love for you to share with the people not only on this line here, but the viewers that are watching. If I'm a chiropractor out of school, or maybe I've been in practice for a while, or I'm a young doc and I really haven't had any coaching, or I'm just doing the things that I learned in school, and maybe I'm struggling in practice, or maybe I'm at a level in practice where I've been hovering and I can't seem to reach the next level, what would be your best coaching tip to those people, how to get started in the direction of a spinal corrective care, subluxation correction type of office?
it's a great question, and I actually talked about this. uh, Is you almost need, and I know it goes back to maybe like this mindset concept, is in order for you to be not to be the victim of your own success, because that's what we end up becoming, right? The more successful we become, the less you want to change because I'm really successful. Is you got to have a reason to change, right? And the only way you can have a reason to change, it can't be related to success. I've never defined my success on how much money I'm making, how much profit I have. I've always defined my success on how well I'm helping people. So therefore, if I can do a better job in helping people, well, now I haven't hit that goal yet because I know I can still do a better job. So if you don't have a reason why to change, you would never change, right? So that's number one. You need a driver, right? And I talked about this actually last week, or this week in the Max Living, one of the Max Living calls, was for me early on in career, it was like Wolf's Law. Like Wolf's Law, it was irrefutable law that if your spine was out of alignment, your spine is going to deteriorate and degenerate. It doesn't matter what my opinion was, it doesn't matter how strong the person was, it doesn't matter how much he exercised, it doesn't matter what supplements he was taking, it doesn't matter my philosophy, it doesn't matter my principle. Spine's out of alignment, it's deteriorating prematurely. Wolf's Law says it will. So how can I not try to put their spine in the very best possible alignment if I know if I don't do that, I'm not doing everything I can. Right? So you need a driver that gives you the reason why. And then once you have that reason why, then you got to have a strong group. You got to be involved. You got to be around the people that are going to want you, that you want to become more like, that you want to be. You have to be around people that are doing better than you. If you're the top of the group and you always want to like sit on top of like, oh, like I'm better than everybody else, everybody's doing worse than me, well then you're never going to grow, right? You have to be, I always want to be the weakest person in the group I'm involved, because if I am, I'm going to try to be better like they are. And that's why I started hanging around people that I thought were that performing at a way higher level than I could ever think I would perform, and done more in chiropractic than I thought I would ever do, because I had the reason why, but now I had to be around the people that would drive me in the right direction or motivate me or emulate them in the right way.
That was brilliant. That was so well said. I thank you for that. And I would say, so now let's take it a step further and say, from a practical sense, if I'm a young doc and I want to start to implement some spinal correction into my office, and I'm ready to make the change, and I'm involved in a group, and I'm hanging around mentors, and I'm getting some coaching, what would be some of the first steps that you would suggest to a doc who has never really practiced any type of subluxation correction or corrective type of care? What would be some of the first steps on a practical level that you would suggest for them?
So my experience in teaching this for the chiropractors, is a lot of chiropractors have a hard time changing how they physically adjust somebody because they've been doing it at a certain level or way for such a significant period of time that it's muscle memory, right? It's kind of like riding a bike. Once you know how to ride it, you're going to ride it that way. And it's really hard to change the way you ride it, right? Because it's so built into your memory system. So I always felt like, and that's what I tried to do, was I tried to say, okay, I'm going to just change all my adjustments first. And it became very frustrating. That's why I became very, very inefficient because I was just trying to change what I was doing. And I honestly believe the best way of changing your delivery is in most chiropractic offices. If you're delivering an adjustment, you're doing something amazing, whatever version of that adjustment that is. What most chiropractors are lacking is what patients do before they adjust them and what they do after they get adjusted and what they do at home. That's the biggest hole in spinal corrective care, not necessarily the forces you're putting on the patient's spine. Because I can probably, if I implemented all my stuff that's outside of chiropractic adjusting to everyone, or any one of these offices that are probably listening today, I would get better results than I would if I changed all their adjusting and did nothing else. I got it. Because guess what? It doesn't matter what version of chiropractic adjustment you do, it works, right? You're removing subluxation, you're taking nerve pressure off, and that's good. But it's the other things that are involved in spinal correction. So I think a good pre-adjustment program, a good post-adjustment program, and a good home care program are the most critical elements. What's the easiest thing to do? Home care. Because home care changes nothing in your office. Get your patients involved in an active home care program. Get them responsible for their own health. Get them participating in themselves getting well, feeling like, hey, I do this every day. I'm changing my spine. I'm involved in correcting my subluxations, and they're getting a sense of responsibility. They're thinking about their nerve system healing as they perform these exercises and therapies at home, and it just makes total sense, right? And it takes no effort on your part, no energy on your part, other than teaching the patients what to do.
Yeah, I think that's such brilliant advice, and that's something that we talk about as coaches to all of our clients is to have the patient actively involved in their own care. And not only that, it takes the onus off the chiropractor because it gives the patient an opportunity to be part of the solution of their own problem. So now if something doesn't work, it's not the chiropractor's fault. And then if something really works, it's a team effort. It's a team victory. And I agree 100% that is the easiest way to start implementing chiropractic care and probably the most successful way. So now let me ask you, so from an economical standpoint or financial standpoint, how how can you describe for somebody that's just very entry level as far as doing this and looking at potentially um, adding home care equipment to their office, what is the easiest way from an economical standpoint to do that and wrap it up into care plans?
Yeah, so obviously, if there's home care equipment, the economical side of that is obviously they have to purchase the equipment. So there's a cost there. And what's good about that financially, even though this is not my motive, but what's good about that financially is that it's a one-time service, right? They buy the equipment, they leave with it. You don't have to see somebody 20 times to make that revenue. It's a one-time thing. So products are good revenue sources for anybody's office, right? But for chiropractors, it tends to be hard for them to understand that because they think the highest revenue in their office is delivering an adjustment. And I'm saying it's a bad revenue, but if somebody buys 20 adjustments, say for $500, let's say, you have to see them 20 times to make that $500. Where if somebody buys home care equipment for $500, it's one time and it's done. Like I don't need to continue. So your time is truly what's valuable, right? So the value there in the exchange is very, very good. So there's a fixed fee, and then there's of course there's the cost involved in you and teaching them, and so they pay for it to learn the exercises, right? And then of course if they're doing their exercises, compliant patients tend to stay under care. So these people tend to re-sign and maintain themselves and be more involved. And then once they are doing their exercises and seeing people, they're now referring people and their families involved. Because I very rarely see like one person in the family doing exercises and the rest of the people in their family not. Like, why are you doing spinal exercises? And I'm not going to do them. So now they want to get involved, right? So you get more families into care because they're all doing exercises together. So the revenue side is crazy if you get them involved in every day in terms of doing their care. It's not just this direct product sale. It's way bigger than that. Okay, guys. So so there's definitely that component. But the way you make it happen in your office is that what doesn't work is, okay, here's your care plan for your chiropractic care, and I think you need this home care exercises too, and I think you need this home care equipment, and this you need to buy over here. And if you separate those two things, most patients think it's an option, right? It's optional, where those things need to be combined. So here's your care plan for your chiropractic care, and here's all your services, here's all the home care that you need with it, and here's everything that you need, and it's all connected. And therefore, this is your plan to help correct your spine, and it's all combined. So my best advice to you is to let's put it in there, include it, right? And what you'll find is that people get better faster. So if you're seeing somebody for an X period of months, let's say your average care plan is 3 to 4 months, and let's say you have to see somebody 36 times in that 3 to 4 month period of time, what you'll find is that you won't need to see them as many visits because their spine's going to change faster. So now your 3 to 4 month visit plan, instead of being 36 visits, could be 24 visits. But what that doesn't mean is that you have to charge less. It means, let's say it's $3,000 for 36 visits. Well, now your plan is $3,000 for 24 visits, because what patients are paying for is the result, not how many times they see you. Chiropractors, we put value on more visits. Patients put value on faster results, right? Like if you had to get your oil changed and you had to come back 3 times a week for 6 weeks to complete an oil change, and you said that costed $2,000, or you went to another place, say, hey, I can change your oil in one visit and it'll cost you $4,000. Which one would you do? Most patients would pay more to get it done quicker. Right? So it's this chiropractic mentality that we put value on more visits. What we need to put value on is changing their spine so they need less visits.
This is brilliant. This is absolutely brilliant, Tony, and thank you very much for going there. You know, and I want to actually, I'd like to expand this conversation and ask you, you know, you've set up this great clinic, you get fantastic results, you have systems in place, but if nobody knows you're there, then nobody comes. So we touched on this when we talked on the phone.
Right.
Obviously, now that I'm in this marketing world and learning different skills and different techniques and strategies to really maximize the results for marketing for our clients, what are you doing to get people to understand and know who you are and what you do and what makes you unique?
Yeah, so I don't know what I can't remember our conversation. I don't remember what I told you, but it says sometimes I don't feel like a chiropractor anymore. I feel like an actor. Okay. I feel like I spend a lot of time producing content so people can learn about what we're doing. So like I spend all this time. I mean, I spend 1 day a week, like on my 5 days a week. I spend 1 day a week pretty much producing content and making videos, doing stuff to get my word out there, so people know that there's an alternative to spinal surgery. And I'm not doing it really. I mean, unfortunately, it's expensive. It costs money to do this. It takes time out of my day and to do all this stuff. But to me, the people are worth it. Like to prevent one surgery, it's worth doing it. So my main motivation is just to reach more people and prevent more surgeries. But yeah, I spend a tremendous amount of time doing that, and that's because I've built, like I said, the systems under me that I have associates now that can deliver the same type of care I deliver. So whether my associate's taking care of my patient or I am, I feel very confident that we're getting the same standard because we're all like doing the same level of type of care. And I can spend time now a day a week, pretty much marketing, producing YouTube videos, writing blogs. I mean, I try to do as much as I can. I mean, I don't think there's no medium or media I would use to try to stop somebody or to educate somebody on the idea of preventing a spinal fusion.
I know you have a very successful YouTube channel. Where can people find you on YouTube?
Yeah, so my YouTube channel is called Scoliosis Reduction Center, and you can just YouTube that. I also have 2 books that I wrote on scoliosis, Scoliosis Hope, and exploring scoliosis for adult patients in the book. And then I go, of course, I have all types of, the other feeds in terms of, Instagram and all the other things that you would imagine when it comes to scoliosis treatment.
We'll definitely link those in the chat underneath
Yep.
this podcast. One thing I would like to ask you is, as far as moving forward goes, we talked when we were on the phone a little bit about your big vision, and you've worked so hard to create these systems in your office and really maximize the delivery and the effectiveness of the delivery of not only your type of care that you're giving, but also the experience that people have in your office. And I know you work very hard on that, you and Tina and your whole team. Can you talk a little bit about that? And what is your big vision as far as taking this system and expanding it into other locations?
Yeah. So, health is, or healing is definitely more than just laying on a table and delivering an adjustment, right? People, I want them to feel involved and engaged and feel like I'm not gonna say that, like, they're part of their healing journey. So we really want to get them involved. So we take a lot of time, and not only to get a good adjustment, but they have a good experience from the moment they come in, the moment they reach our office, the moment they contact, to the moment they leave whatever amount of care they're getting, and we're following up with them on maintenance basis and all those things. I want that experience not to be clinically sound, but also philosophically sound, and also customer satisfaction or experience sounds. So we're looking at all those things and always trying to raise the boat. Like, well, how can we make those things better? How can we make patients feel more loved, more cared about? Because we do. When we honestly do, like our everybody in our office wants these people to get better. So we want to make sure they know that. And sometimes it's hard to express that feeling even though we have it, right? You say, right? So we're always trying to say, how can we for them to know that? And ultimately, what I really want to see is that we can simplify and improve the spinal corrective process. That the norm would be people wouldn't have to travel to get this type of care. That they can go anywhere and they can see, and it becomes the norm. And it becomes not only the norm, it becomes the required standard that in order for patients to have spinal fusion, they have to seek this type of care first. And the insurance roles would inverse, where we're going to deny spinal fusion until you tried corrective subluxation based care yet first. And that's my ultimate vision, is that would change, because that's what really should change. The idea that we see patients after they become surgical level, or after they become so bad that now they're experiencing surgical recommendations, whether it's scoliosis, kyphosis, misalignments, degeneration, herniated discs, spondylolisthesis, I can go on and on, is insane. Like, we should see them way before that moment, and then if it fails, then they consider spinal fusion. That's the model that I want to see happen. So I'm really want to not only take this, everything I've learned and everything I've learned from the masters before me, and I'm looking at simplifying it and delivering it in a way that every chiropractor in the planet, if they're motivated and they have the reason why, and they're willing to make some changes, that you should be able to accomplish it in their own clinic.
Incredible, incredible. I give you tremendous credit because I know how hard, in fact, I can only imagine how hard you have worked and the time you've put into putting this together, not only teaching it to others, but then implementing it into your own office. Where do you see how what you've done, because you really, this is, in my opinion, this is the ultimate of combining philosophy and science and the art of delivering chiropractic, and in a very evidence-based but philosophical vitalistic model at the same time. And that is really unique in our profession. And where do you see this going from a school perspective? And I know we talked about this because I know I have a big vision of seeing another school planted in Canada and working towards that specifically. So, is there a way, or have you had any communication with any of the schools to start to teach these systems inside the school structure?
The good news is this, that the evidence is supporting this version of chiropractic more than any other version, right, as of right now. So I really believe will be what happens. I do think that this is where, if our forefathers were alive today, I think this is the path they would be going down. Okay, got it. As we know, what's taught in chiropractic colleges is normally old. It's not new. So, but it is moving in that direction. And thank God for other techniques like chiropractic biophysics and Taliban and other things that exist there, that all of these things are being now offered in schools as electives or sometimes core requirements. So I do see this happening. It is definitely a slow moving train. It's not something that changes quickly, but it's something that's changing, right? So I am optimistic and excited about because we can see it so evidence in research. Like orthopedic surgeons are now more interested in spinal alignment now than some chiropractors are, right? You know what I'm saying, in terms of trying to get right. So the whole world that's taking care of the health and well-being of people's spines is understanding the importance of alignment. Um, Really, the bare bones subluxation concept, misalignment leads to dysfunction, which leads to bad health, right? So that just thinking of it that simple, therefore alignment matters is the way I like to say it. So I really do believe that this will be the forefront of chiropractic care in the future. How fast? I don't know. I don't know. But hopefully before my time has ended in this earth, we would see this be the more of the standard of care than the exception.
I want to go back. I want to just kind of finish up with some final thoughts here, Tony, because I do want to respect your time. You go back and talk to your 24-year-old self. You know, you're just in chiropractic school. You're still, you know, immature when it comes to really knowing about the profession and knowing the capabilities of chiropractic and the capabilities of what an adjustment can do. What do you now say to your younger self? And I'm saying this intentionally because I want the younger docs or perhaps, you know, docs that maybe that have been in the profession and not been exposed to this type of thinking. What do you say to your younger self for advice?
Well, that's a tough question. Nobody's ever asked me that before, actually, Colin. That's a good question. I think what I would say is because I was so head down, just really driving what you guys just heard me say. And again, I think I have some brain damage. I'm not disagreeing with anybody who says that, is really to enjoy the ride, like to really see your body or see your life transform over. I mean, I'm almost 20 years, I'm almost 30 years in practice at this point, and how many people's lives that you can really change with just what you know and what's in your hands. It's truly remarkable, right? It is unbelievable. I can't even fathom. Like I try to sit down and try to count of how many patients I've taken care of, like how many people I've actively adjusted, and I lost count. I mean, I was in the mid, like how many adjustments I've actually delivered in my lifetime. Um, and again, and even though we look at these huge numbers of people, but it was all worth it, honestly, if you just did one, right? If you really just did one, like if you did one person's life was changed and ultimately became something completely different than they would have become because they met you. So what I would say, I'll probably tell my 24-year-old person is you don't need to do millions. You just need to change one, right? And enjoy the one because that one for that one person is everything, right?
Dr. Tony, you know, you are definitely a blessing to the profession. I'm so honored to call you my friend, and I can't thank you enough for being on the podcast today. This has been an absolute treat.
You're welcome, and I'm happy to come back anytime because having a conversation with you is always a good time.
Thanks, bud. You know, that was fantastic. I'd love to, if you have a few extra minutes, I'd love to give everybody that's on the line an opportunity to maybe throw a question at you if you're okay with that.
Sure, sure.
That'd be okay. All right. So anybody that has a question for Dr. Tony, you can go ahead and unmute your line and turn your camera on, and let's go ahead with some questions.
I had a question about, or two questions. How do you communicate the importance of home care for their spinal correction so they actually are compliant with it? And then the second question is there anything you do different for home care, adjusting, or whatever for small children, children under 5? Like, got a lot of kids with ADD, ADHD, autism, that kind of stuff in my practice right now. So I'm just looking for some advice on that as well.
Yeah. So for terms of compliance, so compliance is always a problem. I mean, we just think of our own lives, you know, most of us fall in and out of good routines. That's just the nature of everybody, right? So I don't think there's a cure or anything I magically say that makes somebody 100% compliant. what I believe it's a culture in your office, and everybody in our office is asking people, hey, how's your home care going? How's your home care going? Like our CAs are asking it, I'm asking it, we're asking it in reviews, we're asking them on their exam forms, we're asking them their re-exam forms, and we're asking how's it going, and not in a way that we want to be judgmental. Is how can we help you be more compliant, or do we need to change anything so you can do it out or better or easier, or something bothering you? So it's always in our forefront. And the fact that since we're always talking about it and always doing it, our patients understand that it's just part of our deal, right? It's part of our deal. So I think that's what helps compliance. But for me to tell you that all my patients are 100% compliant, I would be lying to you. That's not true. But as patients start getting further into care, and they start getting, their spines are getting stable, they normally will decrease how much they're doing, right? I'll start decreasing the amount they're doing or changing what they're doing. And that's important too. Not putting them on a home care program and then like set it and forget it and never alter it for, years is not great, because people get bored. So you want to be taking some things in, changing some things out, changing some ideas, changing some concepts, some durations, making some changes. So it's always a little bit fresh to them. And it doesn't be huge changes, a little bit of changes. Okay. Now, for children with spinal correction, I'm a big proponent of adjusting children, right? And adjusting them from the minute they're born. Okay. I'm not doing spinal correction on a 6-month-old. Okay, guys. So for me, spinal correction, the earliest it can ever start is when kids can start walking and standing, when you can evaluate their structure in a weight-bearing basis. So for me, somewhere around that 2 to 3 years of age in my brain is where an average child will start considering spinal changes, spinal correction, depending on their presentation. Okay, now these are non-scoliosis, kyphosis, non-spinal deformity patients, your typical family practice patient, okay? Somewhere around that range. The great news is most of these kids just need some good adjusting and some good body weighting, right? That's really all they need. They normally don't need a lot of other stuff. Light head weight, light chest weight, light pelvic weight, that's going to mention some good spinal adjusting, and they normally change. I think it starts to change for around that range, somewhere around that 7 range, where they may start needing more. Right. So from like 3 to like 6, 7, it's not the same thing. It's adjustments in body weighting for most of my kids. Right. Very rarely I'm giving them isometrics and all these other things. It's like just that kind of stuff. And then after that age, then I start treating them, a little bit more with the body weighting, maybe some isometrics, but typically molding. Now I'm adding body weighting and I'm adding molding. When we start getting into the young teens, like 12, 13, 14, now I can start potentially using almost all my tools if they're needed. Okay, because I can see some really bad 14-year-olds, right? Right. And again, non-scoliosis patients, like just family practice, and they have reverse curves, and they have kyphosis already. They have all kinds of crazy stuff happening. So that's kind of like my rule set. So like under 2, I'm just adjusting most cases. Over 2, somewhere to about 6 or 7 is adjusting body weighting. Post 6 and 7, body weighting, molding, and adjusting. In that teen range, I'm typically using all my tools if I can.
Anybody else have a question for Dr. Tony? Come on, don't be shy.
Crickets.
This is a great opportunity here. Don't blow it. If you're thinking of a question, don't be afraid to ask it.
I have one.
Tony.
Hi, Tony.
Hey.
I've actually been down to your course many years ago in your beautiful clinic,
cool.
and was a bit intimidated in bringing everything in.
Yes.
How as it's a little bit more difficult for us to get one, but how important do you feel an arthrostim is in doing the adjustments?
So here's a great. I'm glad you brought that up. This is a great story. So I have actually audio and video of me on stage saying that if you adjust with anything other than your hands, you're not a chiropractor. I said that. I said that. And now I live and die with my arthrostim because it can do things that you can't do with your hands. So I think it's a huge component. Like I think it's a really big component. There are some adjustments that are performed that I think are critical, and that you can't get any other way other than with an arthrostim. So I think it's a big thing. And here's the cool news about it is that it allows you to adjust longer, because since it's less physical on you, you can adjust longer, and then it also helps kind of even out all the adjusters. So I'm not sure if you're the only person that's adjusting in your office, but for me, I have 4 adjusters in my clinic now. When I was seeing 1,500 a week, I did also myself, but now I have 4. So we all have to have the kind of similar hands, if that makes sense. So the arthrostim kind of similar, makes everybody a little bit more similar. So I'm a big proponent of the arthrostim, of some type of instrument that pulses like that. There's that, the IQ one is pretty cool. I like that one too. But for me, the arthrostim, I think is the best value for the money.
And one addition to that is we've talked a bit in our group about the number of adjustments that we're often giving.
Per adjustment visit.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I went over this concept called focus fire in my Max Living call, and to expand on focus fire a little bit. For some of you guys know, I was a professional paintball player for a few years, for actually quite a few years, and we won many tournaments. We were national championships for 3 years in a row, and we had this concept of focus fire. So when we ran out into our positions, we would pick locations on the field that we thought an opponent would be in, and we would give it a name, like say focus fire 1 or 2 or 3 or red, orange, green. We gave it a name, and so when we thought somebody would be there on the whole, we all across the entire team, focus fire green. Every single person, whether you could see if somebody was there or not, our entire team turned a gun and shot. Right. And sometimes I remember lobbing it over where I thought the tree would be just to shoot. And the idea was to attack the opponent in every possible angle. So there was no potential way that the person could ever survive. So focus fire. Yeah. Okay. So I like focus fire in chiropractic care, meaning if I'm trying to reduce forward head posture, I'm going to do everything I can to reduce forward head posture, but I may not do everything I can for the pelvis. So what I'm trying to tell you is I pick an area or a thing that I want to correct, and I'll adjust every component of that adjustment and may do less elsewhere. Okay. So I don't like to limit on how many adjustments. I like to limit my idea on a problem. So let's say occiput extension. I want to correct occiput extension. Well, I may do negative Z. I may do the arthrostim. I may do anterior. I may do everything I can do to try to improve occiput extension, and then maybe with the pelvis only 1 or 2. I'm not going to do everything I can for occiput extension, everything I can for pelvic rotation, everything I can for posterior L5, everything I can for translation of T12. That's just too much. Right? So I like the idea of focus fire. I hope that made sense. What I'm saying, like it's not number but areas.
That's a brilliant analogy. That was a great question, Tony, actually. Thank you for asking that. That's fantastic. I remember, and Tony, maybe you can address this. I remember having a conversation with Dr. Ben years ago, and this was at a place where we needed to get to the next step. And we were talking about just systems in the office, and he was asking about adjusting techniques. And I said, well, we've always done diversified adjusting. We added home care to get spinal correction, which was the deciding difference. When you talked about spinal correction, we were doing diversified adjustments. We didn't change anything with our adjusting technique, but then we started doing pre and post x-rays, added spinal correction, and we were getting incredible changes, like cervical curve changes, lumbar, pelvic unleveling, and so on, changes, scoliosis changes, just by not changing anything, but adding home care. And I said to him, we're trying to get to the next level of volume. And he said, just start adjusting less. He said, and this was interesting, you can't, you confuse the neurology of somebody if you over adjust them. It's like banging on the piano. You have to play very intentionally to have good melodies. And it's the same thing with adjusting the spine. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, and that's the other component of it. So I would say if I'm looking by region, I would say somewhere around the 7-ish adjustments is probably where I would want to stay, somewhere in that range, but I'm not limited to that. I don't like using a number. I like to use that idea of I want to correct this one problem, right? And say, so whether just to think of pelvic rotation. So I may have them pre-wedge, I may use a drop, I may use a side posture, and I may do some, and then their home care matches that, and then their pre-adjustment matches that. And then for the rest of the spine, I may not do as much. I may just do like one cervical and one mid back. So I like to do more in the area that I'm trying to correct and less in the areas that I'm not. Right. And that's what I think, because what most of us end up doing, we're not trying to do a lot everywhere or a little everywhere, right? So and then what's amazing about this concept is somebody goes through a re-exam, this changes, and then you say, okay, let's put you in maintenance phase. Then you take a reevaluation 6 months later and say, okay, that's holding, but you still have a problem in your neck. Let's focus fire on your neck now. And now I made you less in their pelvis and their low back, and now I made you more in their cervical spine. And now their care changes a little bit, and now you increase your frequency a little bit again, and you take them through a second corrective phase, and now you're focusing fire in a different area. And you do that for like, maybe 6 weeks, take a post x-ray, that's changed. The lower part's holding, now let's put you in maintenance, and then maybe 6 months later, take another x-ray, hey, your neck's holding, your low back's holding, but you have something in your thoracic spine you want to correct. So now we do focus fire on your thoracic spine. Got it? And that's how you kind of like sequence up. This is what I think is really the way it corrects. I call it sequential correction. You kind of sequence up their spine in different areas, working one area at a way, and also one plane at a time, meaning either sagittal plane or coronal plane, and you improve those areas one by one, step by step, sequencing them up over a period of whatever amount of care they need.
That's awesome. I can't tell you how valuable that advice is. I hope everybody took notes on that. That's really cool. Any last questions for Dr. Tony? Okay, well, I just want to say, and when I look at you in your life, professional paintball player, I know you were a great golfer. You're an awesome snowboarder. I mean, you've gone heli skiing, heli snowboarding, and I mean, whatever you do it to the limit, and that is just amazing. So it's been so valuable having you on the show today, having you on the podcast and on the call. Can't tell you how much we appreciate your time. So Tony, thank you again.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me again.